of competitiveness between the euro area and other regions in the world. 88% of respondents, and this is probably as high as you can ever get in a survey, believe that the key, and I emphasize the key economic priority for the next 5 years should be improving economic productivity. Again, these results are consistent across sectors, across countries. There are some countries that may be slightly more positive than others, but this is something that we see all across. So clearly, this is demanding for a change of focus on policy, emphasizing business competitiveness as the common theme. Now, this provides a way to change the conversation in Brussels and in the national capitals. So rather than futilely debating austerity versus growth, what the business community is telling us is that we need pragmatic solutions that focus on spending on investments that will increase productivity and competitiveness, but at the same time making economies on other areas and other expenses that represent either subsidies for consumptions or lifestyle. We need to bite the bullet, but we should not be ignoring the long-term investments. In terms of some of the areas that were emphasized in the report of policy areas to tackle, I would like to highlight 3. The first was the area of labor costs and lack of flexibility. This came out as a very strong theme in our responses. The second is the feeling that currently businesses in Europe are over-regulated, both in starting businesses as well as growing them. And then the lack of culture of innovation and entrepreneurship, which is something that Bruno will discuss later on. There was also a strong emphasis on the importance of trade to get us out of the current situation and bring growth. There was an emphasis both in realizing the dream of the internal market. So clearly there is still work to be done to make the internal unified market a reality, but also some of the trade deals with other regions, particularly with the United States. So who are the actors that are going to bring these changes in productivity? We asked our participants to rank different types of companies in their ability to improve economic productivity in Europe over the next 10 years. We asked them to rank startups, small companies, medium-sized companies, state-owned companies, European multinationals, and foreign multinationals. Next slide, please. The result, which is quite remarkable and interesting, is that the majority of our participants, so 84%, thought that European medium-sized enterprises are the ones that are better positioned to improve productivity in Europe over the next 10 years. So if we add the times that they were ranked 1, 2, and 3, clearly they come ahead of any other type of companies. This is followed by European startups. And this basically reinforces a message that was discussed this morning about the importance of emphasizing the support of small and medium-sized enterprises, as well as the entrepreneurial fabric in Europe. Now, one might ask, given the audience, why are not the multinationals doing better? Maybe they are already highly productive, so additional gains in productivity are not that high. Maybe they have options for investment outside that basically would get them to optimize investments differently. But the clear policy implication from this is that the government and policymakers should focus on developing policies to help these medium-sized enterprises and startups to develop in terms of productivity and competitiveness. That would involve in terms of the financial support. Many of them complain in terms of access to capital markets, over-regulation and reducing the red tape, and something that was discussed also this morning, access to international markets. Many of these companies are very strong locally or regionally, but they lack access to really become global leaders. So in summary from the survey, what we get is a message of both impatient but hope, a call to action that is based on the competitiveness imperative. If Europe focuses on making the environment such that there is greater business competitiveness. That will be the way to both improve the fiscal and to grow the market. And third, the policy for small and medium-sized enterprises to increase productivity, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Now, these are just a few highlights of the study, and I encourage you to please read the study in detail. There are many other interesting points. Thank you very much.
Javier, thank you very much. I'm going to turn the floor over now to Dominique Reiniche, who is the chairman of the Europe Group of the Coca-Cola Company. And Dominique will set the scene for the debate. Dominique.
Thank you, Bob. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased, I have to say, to have the opportunity to chair this panel. As many of you will know that I'm a passionate advocate of getting Europe back on the fast-track growth, the only way, in my view, to reignite the EU dream of its founders for our children and our grandchildren. That said, it has become painfully obvious that Europe is currently at the core of the global crisis and that we are at a turning point to get our act together. So, to introduce the session and the great panel here on stage, I would like to briefly share 3 beliefs which are very consistent with the outcomes of the Booz INSEAD study that Javier, Bruno, and Perola just outlined. The first belief, my first belief, I should say, is that the debate is not between austerity or growth. Europe needs 2 legs, 2 strong legs, to be fit for the global race. The first one is to reach sustainable debt levels in our respective countries, driven by budgetary discipline and public financial resources steered towards the real economy and value creation. The second leg is about creating the right context for competitiveness, the competitiveness imperative, as named by the study, and thus growth. This includes 2 key priorities, 2 key ones, many others, but let's focus on the 2 most important ones. First, a more flexible labor market with a regulatory environment that fosters entrepreneurship, and very importantly, as we heard this morning, Europe should accept and even reward risk-taking and failure. Difficult to hear, but it's the truth. Second, we also need a strong political and economic governance at EU level, especially within the Eurozone, focusing on what really matters, namely fiscal harmonization, trade, and youth employment, instead of regulating far too many things. So this is the first one. My second belief is that we need to redefine together the respective roles of states and businesses to unleash this European growth potential. Maybe what I say here will be controversial, as I think that businesses also have to accept some strategic planning and industry vision from the EU and from the states in vital sectors like aeronautics, for instance. Likewise, states have to accept business having a stronger voice and taking part in the public debate. It's a real 2-way street. My third belief is that youth employment has to be at the center of all our strategies to get innovation, hope, and competitiveness back. Shame on us to be facing such high levels of youth unemployment across the EU. This requires much closer relationship between business and schools, not only universities, but it starts very early at school, research centers, and I'm encouraged, I have to say, by the recent German-French commitment around 3 pillars. Ah, it works, I think. It's good news, this German-French agreement, but it will only be good news, really, if we play our part, businesses, by providing youth with vocational training opportunities, internship opportunities, recruitment opportunities. We have to be an example. So this is for the 3 beliefs. Now you would think it's enough. No, it's not. We are in a difficult situation to win this battle for competitiveness and growth. So it also requires, I think, a few prerequisites for Europe to remain relevant not only now, but also in the future. Because as we heard, impatience and worries are growing. So, number 1, trust. Trust is for sure the most critical one, as many of you outlined this morning. We need to restore confidence, not only between all EU stakeholders, but also with the rest of the world. And I think we should together design and promote something concrete, which could be a trust pact for a growth pact. How can we do that? And this brings me immediately to my second condition. I think we have to design a new model of business leadership. And we have to raise our voice and take our part in the political and economic debate. There has never been a greater need for leadership from all businesses here in this room. Why do I say that? Because growth is an integral part of what we do, who we are, how we operate day in and day out. Growth is hardwired within our DNA. Thus, I'm convinced that business needs to step up to the challenge of reigniting growth in Europe through a new kind of enhanced collaboration. I also think that this type of conference can be a powerful catalyst to create a kind of golden triangle of business, government, and civil society coming together. And don't be shocked, but the evidence that we are not yet there in terms of leadership and influence is that not a single European commissioner took time out of their busy agenda today to join us in this event. I think this is for us a challenge to be even more influential and powerful. The last one, renewed trust, I said, new leadership, absolutely needed, and with no doubt, last but not least, the right mindset of bold ambition and endless imagination. We have to think big to reignite the European dream and surprise the rest of the world. So we will be most interested to hear the thoughts of the panel as business leaders about how to recreate this inspirational mindset of the man and why not the woman in the moon. I'm sure that each of you in the panel will inspire the audience and deliver your own beliefs, experience, and even more importantly, your pragmatic solutions as it relates to your businesses in logistics, software, hardware, that we will all feed back to the European institutions tomorrow morning. So, gentlemen, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Dominique. I'm going to first turn to Ben Knappen, who's the permanent rep of the EIB to Brussels, and get his perspective to the challenge that, Dominique, you have set down.
Well, thank you, Bob. Let me first compliment Boos, INSEAD, and the executives for not only hosting this event, but providing us for the 3rd time in a row with the report. When you repeat this, it gets more weight, it gets more meaning because you see trends, and it's very helpful, and I think it's a wonderful initiative. I do share pretty much the analysis that Xavier was giving when he presented the results. If you look at the survey of the business leaders, what you can see is one of the things that's important to underline is when it comes to competitiveness, we do pretty well. With 5 EU countries in the top 10 of the Global Innovation Index, and 3 outstanding, one not being a member of the European Union, but still pretty close, Switzerland, and then you have Sweden and Germany. Now, there's one other element, and that should be a warning signal for all of us, because competitiveness is one thing, but the future of competitiveness is obviously connected to other things. And there we have to ask ourselves, where are we when it comes to R&D, when it comes to investment in innovation? And we all know that there are persisting differences between countries and across regions in Europe, which is confirmed by all the indicators. Things like R&D intensity, but also patents. We are still struggling to reach the 3% target when it comes to R&D intensity and expenditure as a percentage of GDP. Basically, only our Scandinavian friends, Finland, Sweden, and Denmark, reached that goal. With Sweden for Finland at 3.78, which is still less than Korea, which is over 4%. But anyway, they reach it. But there is a huge difference because we have countries that are vastly lagging behind. And we have to address this issue, and your report, I think, is very helpful on creating the awareness on doing so. Then there's another issue we have to take into account, which is also hampering when it comes to investment in innovation. That is the fragmentation of markets in Europe. It's fragmentation when it comes to competitiveness, huge differences of competitiveness within the European market, and also huge differences when it comes to costs. As we all know, a business that has to go to a bank in Italy is way more expensive than the same business having to do the same thing in Austria. And this is really undermining all the comparative advantages we should have being one market. Maybe I would like to address the other point, which is stressed in the report, which is the investment in knowledge-based capital, basically driver of innovation. As we all know, investment in knowledge-based capital, defined as assets without physical embodiment, is crucial for productivity growth and crucial for future competitiveness. According to the OECD, the ease with which companies that patent can attract capital in the US or in Sweden is much higher than, for instance, for similar companies in Italy and Spain. And this is especially the case for young firms with young CEOs, more likely to develop radical innovations. Of course, there is this issue of finance. When it comes to the access to finance for knowledge-based firms, of course, there's the lack of collateral for intangible assets and uncertainty, and the perception of risk. We all know that this has to do with young companies in particular, young firms, young executives. Banks are rather reluctant to take risks. Obviously, risk aversion is something which is a general trend anyway, due to the fact that banks have to rearrange their balance sheets, and also in quite some countries in Europe, the rating of the sovereign is undermining the competitiveness of banks anyway. This brings me to the European Investment Bank, because that's where we at some point have to come in. As you may know, the European Investment Bank is by far the largest international public investment bank in the world. We are about 3-4 times as big when it comes to total lending volumes as, for instance, the World Bank. We got a capital increase by our owners, the 27 member states of the European Union, allowing us to invest over the coming 2 years an extra 60 billion, We lend about 65 billion a year this year. That's our goal. We come in as a sort of public intervention to enable and to facilitate. The EIB is a buy and hold institution, and we try to provide long-term perspective in the funding supply. The maturities are 20, 25 years, so it's quite different from average private banks. The support of the knowledge economy is a core operational priority for us as a EIB group. And our objective is to support investment projects in new skills, new technologies, facilitating the reallocation of factors and the creation of new assets. And just to illustrate, if you look at our total lending volume, which is about 550 billion, close to 1/4 goes to R&D, to innovation, and to investment in human capital and skills. And we are developing new strategies for lending to innovation, focusing mainly on new instruments tailored to support R&D and innovation in sectors where particularly SMEs and mid-caps play a predominant role. And we hope to have an additional lending capacity of about 20 billion over the coming 3 years, which is focusing on growth and competitiveness in these sectors. And what do? We facilitate the access to funding. What we also do is we leverage EU funds through appropriate risk sharing. We have a risk-sharing financial facility with the European Union, using small bits of the European budget as a first loss guarantee, enabling us to do more lending and at the same time keeping us our AAA status, which of course is pivotal to make a difference in the market. We invest in synergies between businesses and universities, also through development of technology transfer and seed funding by our private arm, the European Investment Facility. And we try to reinforce the availability of financial instruments for innovative mid-caps with new schemes, guarantee schemes for financial intermediaries and equity risk debt financing for direct financing to mid-caps. What we also do is we promote a selection of viable projects leading to potential innovative breakthroughs that can contribute to the EU competitiveness. Basically, we try to be strictly in line with the objectives of the European Union and the Horizon 2020 programs, which means focusing on inclusiveness, focusing on sustainability, and focusing on innovation. And these three combined should enable us to regain competitiveness for the future. What we do basically is we are in the business of lending, of blending with EU funds, and of advising. And that's how we want to perceive our goal, which is your goal, we share, is to invest more in R&D, invest more in innovation, and more in particular, invest also in human capital and skills, which basically are the fundament on which all this can be realized. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. Let's get some reactions from the other panelists. Philip, we've got to relaunch the machine, reviving the economy. What's your prescription?
Well, I think having just listened to Ben, I think we're in pretty good shape. We're perhaps on the road to recovery. It's a long road, and I think that's one of the challenges. It's kind of easy for us to get impatient. I have a high degree of confidence that I'm certainly not going to be able to solve the structural problems. I think we all understand what they are, and I think we just have to be patient. I think the fact that the structural challenges within the European Union, within the fiscal union, are known. I think all of the right people are thinking about them. You know, the initiatives of the European Investment Bank are exactly the initiatives that we business need. But in our business, which is where finance is really, really important, one of the biggest constraints is availability of debt. The reality is for the last, what, 4.5 years, the only banks that we've been able to do business with are German banks. And the only reason we can do business with those banks is because we've got a very big, strong global brand. So you have to be big, strong, international, global to access that debt. So then as soon as you come down to small and medium-sized enterprises, they haven't really got a hope. There's many of our customers, for example, in Italy, which may be an extreme, where they're actually going out of business simply because they can't get the required finance to keep their businesses moving forward. So whilst there are great initiatives coming from the European Investment Bank, and they're very, very welcome, we're not getting enough liquidity back into the private banking sector. So that remains a problem, and I think the consequence of that is it erodes business confidence. And as soon as you erode business confidence, people stop making investment decisions. And we're finding that very much with many of our customers who want to put a foot forward, take some risk, having become, let's say, risk averse over the last number of years. They want to take the risk, but the consequences are so unknown that they would prefer to stand back and not take that step forward. And we're also, you know, as a company, almost in the same place. We want to take that risk and step forward, but because we've been so badly burned, we're also a little bit nervous and cautious to do so. So the difference between America and Europe, the Americans have confidence first. They've got a slightly healthier banking system, but you know, our banking system can be fixed. If we can get liquidity into it, if we can take some of the lessons from our American colleagues, take their confidence, we can take business forward. We'll make those investments, we'll take those risks, and we'll get the economy going again.
Thank you, Philip. Jacques, your formula?
Before answering your question, Xerox has been partner of this event since the beginning. So I would like to reflect first on what has changed since we started in 2010. Have we truly managed over the last 3 years to revitalize the European dream? I think that the answer is, I guess, obvious for all of us. We have collectively failed in really changing the game so far. It's a bit like at the beginning of the session, we had the alarm on, and then the message is, don't worry, keep doing what you do. So I think that the way I would portray things is that there is no sense of urgency. Big difference between the way we look at our business, managing corporation, and the way, let's say, our states are managed. So let's reflect a bit about what has happened in my business over the last 3 years. More or less, my business has not changed immensely in terms of level of activity. I still have the same number of employees, roughly, compared to 3 years ago. But in truth, some of my business units have been suffering a bit. Some of my geographies have been suffering a hell of a lot. We have disinvested some areas, and we have invested in some growing areas. But overall, the comment is that the profitability of my business in Europe is under heavy pressure. So, and by the way, discussing with my colleagues during breaks or lunchtime, I am to believe that I am not the only one to face these kind of challenges, in truth. So this leads to the question I have from my boss, which is, Jacques, what can you do? And the way she asked me to solve this is, what can we do to get Europe healthier? So what do I do? I mean, I spend my time in 3 thirds. First third is to meet with customers and partners to do more business. The other third is to speak with my employees, with my people, in order to convince them that we need to change. And the last third is to educate my headquarters about what can be done to improve the situation. The first 2/3 of my discussion are quite easy. I mean, my people have understood, are aware of the situation, and they've understood the need for change. And the customers are all looking for productivity. So it's discussion there. But then when trying to convince my boss that she has to put dollars in Europe, it's a different challenge. So like all global companies, Xerox has to make bets and have to decide between where do I put my dollars in order to grow my business on the long term. So the way I try to convince her is twofold. One is, first, Europe is not one size fits all. There are, within Europe, pockets of excellence, pockets of growth opportunities. So we are acquiring businesses, we are developing business in some areas. Some are under other pressure. But so, first point, one size does not fit all across Europe. Second thing that, of course, I am fighting against my colleagues from other territories, US or the rest of the world. And the arbitrage is made on what we call internally a return on invested capital. So when we speak about gap in competitiveness, I call it fight to get better returns. So I see three things. First is, in order to get Europe healthier, first thing is reduce cost of running business in Europe. It's all about, it has been covered several times in this morning, lower the tax burden we have on our businesses. Of course, this will be possible only if we manage to reduce public deficit, reform public spendings, and make a better use of our money, and spend the money where it's really required. I will come back to that. And definitely simplify the labor laws. I mean, the point made this morning with more close to 20 million people unemployed is just a drama. Second thing is, I have to grow my business. So I have to do my homework to make sure that what I'm offering to the marketplace is making sense. But then I do believe that it has been stated several times as well that the growth opportunity for my business will come through the capacity of have more small and medium business being successful in the long term. So definitely I will support all the efforts that the states and the Commission could do on supporting innovations, training programs. We mentioned Erasmus this morning. And then overall facilitating and rewarding what we could call the entrepreneurship is absolutely the name of the game. And let's be honest on that one. It's not a they and us. We cannot spend our time blaming the EU or the Commission for not doing what they should do. I am the first one, in order to deliver my results short term, to as well cut spendings on training. Not hiring when I have vacancies, or localizing expatriates. So we have as well, us company, to do our homework on that. So it's not only blaming other people that we will fix it. As we said, it's a collective effort. And the last thing, the third thing, which I think is the most important one, and that we can fix the most quickly, is stop. And here maybe I have a French prism to my point. Stop the negative, disastrous communication which is made by public bodies. Corporations, entrepreneurs are not the bad guys. They are not the guys destroying jobs. We have no pride when we have to restructure. We are not the bad guys not paying tax. I really want to kill this message which is more or less success is bad, or even success should be a bit suspicious. So I do believe that we need agility across the board, agility in the way we reform and allow business to develop. We need courage to face reality. Entrepreneurs are hard workers. Entrepreneurs are risk takers. Entrepreneurs are the chance for Europe. So the solution will come from business for the job of our kids.
Thank you, Jacques-Pierre. Pierre, what's your formula for this?
Well, if we come back to the Mr. Barroso 2010 agenda for Smarter Europe, he said smart, competitive, and inclusive society. Since the beginning of this meeting, we speak a lot about finance, and I don't think finance is the only tool to go back to prosperity and competitivity. So it's one of the tools, but not maybe the first to be used. We have built quite a good knowledge and information society for Europeans. And I think that's a success. We have 60 to 64% of the Europeans are connected. And so they benefit from a strong, good information. That's true for citizens. Now for enterprise, I think a large enterprise benefit a lot from this open society. They have the means to connect with the EU to get all the information. But when you go down to SMB, they are excluded. And we have to talk about the means on how to get them connected and how could we get them to benefit again from that huge effort that European community has deployed in the last years. First, we should manage better our information. I'll take a quick example that surely everybody knows. We heard for months and months about this report from Rinald and Rigoff about saying that for a country going about over 90% debt versus GDP, the potential growth was 0.1%. Untrue. Wrong information. It was a calculation error. The right number is 2.2 growth potential. And every leader in Europe used this report to pound on the head of the Ministry of Finance around Europe. So I think the leadership of Europe has to understand that a digital world means a good control of the information that is in that world. And there is a need for new tools to govern this information. The right information means the right decision, and the right decision means trust from the citizen of Europe. Dominique was speaking about. So there's a lot to be done. By the way, the problem is not only we work on that subject, the problem is not only at the EU level, but also as an average decision made in large enterprise are made on the base, for 40%, I think, on the base of obsolete documents. Food for thought. Send the right information. Our small SMBs, they need help. But the first help they need money, surely, on the midterm, is to help them to look up at the potential they have on their market. And we should have the automatic mechanism to send that information with quality to them, push information, because they need to understand the commercial agreements Europe have with other countries in the world. They need to understand the growth potential on their vertical market. They need to understand the new patents, the new techniques appearing, and the trade agreement potential in their sector. So they need a selected information to help them to move before setting a plan, having new ambition, and looking for money. So, and there, the management of information is key to deliver this right information to them. Maybe also a stronger collaboration between different networks like EU and Chamber of Commerce to deliver at the door of those people that now look just to survive the right information that gets them the strength to go for development, go for project, go for exportation again. So SMB tries to survive. It's the wrong state. We need to help them with information first.
Thank you, Pierre. So that's a first introduction from my panelists. I'd like now to turn your attention to the screens. We've got a message about the OECD perspective from the Secretary General, Angel Gurria, on the OECD perspective on growth here in Europe. We have the video, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to participate in this third annual edition of the State of the European Union. Revitalizing the European dream is a crucial and a permanent task. The European Union is not only the most advanced regional integration process, it is also an enlightened vision of shared prosperity, peace, solidarity, and social cohesion. We must not lose sight of this vision, of this dream, while continuing to strengthen its foundations. The European Union is facing several historic and simultaneous challenges. It has to restore growth, employment, sustainability, and credibility. It also has to adapt its institutional framework and take further integration steps to enable more efficient decision-making. All this will take time, perseverance, strong leadership. But to conclude that these extraordinary challenges can put the integration project at risk would simply be wrong. In fact, I'm happy to report that Europe is moving on the right track. At last, we can see the proverbial light at the end of the tunnel. Many countries in Europe are seizing the opportunity to undertake deep reforms, and we're starting to see some positive developments. Between 2009 and 2013, for example, the average structural budget deficit of the euro area has been reduced from 5% to 1% of GDP. Now, this means that the stabilization and eventual reduction of government debt is a goal within reach. This will also allow moderation of the fiscal consolidation effort. In fact, we expect the fiscal consolidation effort in 2014 to be the most modest since 2010. Now, some governments, of course, still need to deliver by reducing inefficient public spending, by reforming pension systems, etc. But that can be done at a pace that is compatible with growth. Now, the euro is today more credible and is succeeding in getting through the sovereign debt crisis. And this is no coincidence. It is due to the policy decisions of its individual members, as well as those of its central institutions, the EC, the EU, the ECB, and others. So, and what's more important, markets share this view. The spreads of Ireland, Portugal, Spain, and Italy are now back to much more reasonable levels, and their adjustment programs are restoring sustainability. But to relaunch the European dream, we need to create more jobs. We need to create more opportunities, especially for the youth. And we need stronger, greener, fairer growth. Structural reforms to improve education, innovation, competition, deregulation, labor and product markets, taxes, health systems, R&D, infrastructure, etc., will help achieve this goal. Our estimates indicate that a broad, well-sequenced, and well-sold reform package can increase output by between 10 and 30% over the medium and long term in many European countries. Of course, this will depend on the country, but also on the sequencing and the success of the clustering of these structural reforms. And this will translate into greater job creation and a higher level of well-being. The OECD is helping many European economies to move in this direction. Now, my dear friends, a regional integration process as ambitious and as path-breaking as the one you are building in Europe is always work in progress. It's not a continuous and linear ascension. It is rather an irregular stop-and-go process. But let's not be discouraged by the scaffolding, by the noise and the inconvenience that transpires in the short term because of the chantier, because of the works going on. Beneath the scaffolding, a new Europe is being created. Europe is always reinventing itself, redesigning itself, stealing itself, creating new institutions for itself. And it will shine again and impress the world once again if we don't lose sight of the original vision and the ultimate purpose of this remarkable venture. The commitment to build common prosperity through further economic, financial, and social integration to revitalize the European dream. Have a most inspiring seminar. Thank you.
Thank you on behalf of Angers. So I'd like to open the debate. We have a couple questions first that, for those of you who heard last year, we have some voting machines. All of you have a little remote control. Please do not leave the room today with these. It will cause the alarm bells to go off again. These will not work on your TV or anywhere else. Can we have the test question, please? On screen? Not that one. The test question, first question, free question. Come back to my free question. Can you do that? Free question. Free question 1. There we go. So this is, you see there are 4 numbers. This is really hard for those of you after lunch with your blood sugars low. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you strongly disagree with what I'm about to say, you push 1, 2, disagree, 3, agree, strongly agree. Let's do a test. My question is, what do you think? Will the strikers outside the building here prevent you from going home tonight? There are strikers outside. Will they prevent you from going home? 1, 2, 3, or 4? Please vote. So all of you think you will get home tonight, 57%. Okay, that's how the system works. Okay, you've all now, this is a learning society. You now all know how to use your voting machines. Let's go to the first proper question now. First question, which areas of investment should be prioritized to increase European competitiveness? Number 1, investments in R&D. 2, education and labor mobility. 3, regional infrastructure investments. Or 4, export-oriented trade agreements and industrial policy. Ladies and gentlemen, the vote is open. Okay, I'm going to ask the panelists, each of you now, to comment on these results. We'll start first with you, Philip. Does this surprise you?
No, because I voted on the 50% education and labour mobility is absolutely the right answer. I think a little bit of me speaks from where I come from, which is Ireland, and its historical competitive advantage, at least, was education. And mobility. Mobility came about perhaps forced hundreds of years ago, but there has been a tradition of emigration all around the world. And through the last 20, 30 years, massive investment in education, bringing free education all the way through to third level university for everybody. And it created a huge strength in the early 90s, and along with clearly some financial incentives. It was a very attractive place for enterprises to come and get access to those skills and grow their businesses and their companies. And it was also created through a great sort of foothold and entry point to the rest of Europe. So I think at a certain point, nothing will beat education. I've been pretty mobile myself through my career, And I think there is nothing that will beat mobility. There is no better experience than working with people that have more than one experience. And I think that diversity in of itself brings innovation and creativity. So I really do think, well, on one hand, of course, we want more euros going into R&D and technology, but if we get it into education and mobility, at least side by side, I think we'll be winners all day long.
Thank you. Javier, what do you think on the results?
So I was interested in the fact that the investments in infrastructure were actually quite low, which I think reflects the fact that, I mean, in terms of infrastructure, Europe is doing quite well. And really, the investment needs to focus on the intangible. So I actually voted for the R&D, partly because being in a university, I have a vested interest. But I also agree that the role of education and international experience is key as an antecedent as well to innovation. So I was pleased.
Of course, I agree, because it was my third belief, and I think there is no youth employment and no avoiding of our current youth tragedy without fostering not only more education, but an education which is better fitted to the labor market needs. That's why I talked about vocational training, trying to match, the job opportunities and training opportunities, and frankly also, as you said, Bob, industry and all companies playing their part, making an effort to welcome these trainees.
Ben?
Well, to be quite honest, I was a little bit surprised as far as the discrepancy was concerned, because I do agree education and mobility are key, but I was in Vilnius yesterday, Lithuania, where mobility led to the fact that instead of 4.8 million inhabitants, they in a couple of years went down to only 4, because there was so much mobility that people started working somewhere else. Now, I think that if you that these two are very much connected. It's very hard and rather artificial to separate education from investment and innovation, but basically it are two sides of the same coin. So I would very much like to see them connected, and to have us being aware that they have to be connected.
Pierre?
Well, of course, I think education is the key of our future, but I think it's more than that. And in this Barroso presentation, he speaks about an inclusive society. And education, it's a way to make sure our society is inclusive, that we can get everybody an opportunity, and even I think we should offer job seekers better access to education again, that they stay active, that they can promote themselves instead of staying at home. Because there we destroy potential. So education for job seekers.
Jacques?
First, a complaint, because Pierre and I didn't have the machine. So it would have completely changed the output, of course. No, I was surprised by the answer, but it was my answer as well. Thank you. Just one comment. I think, Dominique, you mentioned the Crédit d'impôt recherche, the mechanism that we have in France and maybe in other countries across Europe that benefit investment on R&D in the French territory. I was just thinking that maybe there should be a training Crédit d'impôt, something like that, as a potential suggestion.
Bob, I'm just going to be cheeky here and jump in, because one of the things with two young kids, 10 and 8, and having done the Polish education system, the English education system, and now an American education in the Netherlands, one of the things that has struck me for young people, how hard it is to just get to a high standard of education. We went back to London and house prices were at the top of the market, so we ended up in perhaps a secondary area of London. and the compromise was we would send our kids to private school. And it's no pleasure. A, it costs a fortune, and B, I don't necessarily think the education was particularly any better than I had when I had no choice growing up. It was one school. But the competition for kids to get a good education is absolutely unacceptable. And that's why also I think we need to put it at the top of our agenda. It should be a top education for all, and I think we can get there, and we should absolutely put all of our might to get there.
If I may add, I think the training question is not only for young people, it's as well training all along the life. It's all about how you keep you employable.
Thank you, panel. Let's go to the next question. How should the EU help ameliorate business competitiveness for mid-sized companies, which we've heard about all day today? One is to facilitate intra-Europe labor migration. 2, promote development of regional clusters of companies. 3, facilitate investments in low-cost countries in Europe. Or 4, reduce barriers within the EU internal market. They're all important. Please choose one. 2, 3, or 4. This is worse than the X Factor. And the winner is, if we can keep the results on the screen, reduce barriers within the EU internal market. Philip, what do you think?
Yep, struck gold again. So a bit of a tricky question to respond to. Were my initial thoughts. I think it's pretty obvious. If we really want to have an integrated European Union, we've got to be able to make it easier to trade with each other and to expand our businesses beyond single borders. And the amount of thought and the cost to expand your business beyond your domestic setup is huge and almost prohibitive, I guess, certainly for small and medium enterprises. And recently we actually sponsored, it's a small sponsorship, one of the UK government agencies are creating an environment where they've got a roster of major companies that small and medium enterprises can go and talk to if they want knowledge and expertise around how to move into new countries, et cetera, et cetera. And you know, for a small cost, you get your name on there and you get put forward to advise these companies for free as to how they can deal with moving across borders. So there's you know, we can get much better at getting that information out to people and companies, which I think will help to create movement. And we need to also try and remove some of those prohibitive barriers that cost businesses a lot of money to move.
Javier?
So I think this is absolutely on point, and I would like to emphasize particularly the integration on services, because I think the EU is okay, pretty good in terms of products, but I think we are still missing a lot on the integration of the service area. Services are the major employers. I mean, manufacturing is important, but it's less than services. And there is the greatest opportunity. There are many services that have the potential to be exported. So services is not just local services. So I think this, there are many barriers, protectionism, maybe technical barriers, regulation. Just one example that I would like to bring on based on some interviews with executives in the IT sector. Cloud computing today is being constrained by the fact that data has to be stored in country by country. So that is limiting the consolidation of this very, very important technology within Europe. So we need to open up and to allow companies to be pan-European providers on these services.
Yeah, for me, it's almost not a question, because if we are serious about the competitiveness imperative and having flexible labor markets and having entrepreneurs with a scale to expand, having a real single market instead of having a theoretical single market is absolutely crucial. In
this case, I fully agree with the outcome. internal markets. And well, if you can call it services. A good friend of mine has a small internet company, and they do things that are connected to music. He is negotiating now for 3 years with Paris, in Germany, in London, in Spain, to figure out the differences in copyrights when he uses a piece of music from somewhere. He's very tempted to cross the ocean and to start the same concept in the US, because he only has to go one way to New York to fix the thing, and then he is in business. Other example, and we should blame ourselves on that. We have been discussing the European patent for about 30 years. We now are pretty close to creating one after decades. But we haven't quite succeeded. We figured out that in order to get a compromise, we need an office in Paris, we need one in Munich, and we need one in London. Some countries from the southern part don't participate because their language is not enough involved, because they wanted to reduce, for efficiency reasons, it to 3 languages. So at this point in time, it takes you 5 times as much time to get a patent registered Europe-wide than in the US, and it's 8 times as expensive. And we all know it, and we all manage to have our petty, small national priorities on the forefront in order to reduce the speed to create this. So there are very practical things we can do if we just move on and get angry. Thank you.
Yes, and as a result, most of the technology companies in Europe, they put their patent in US. So I can't be more supportive than the result I saw on the screen. The companies, of course, all through Europe need to have the right information at their door. They need to understand and get all the tenders that are in the sector of activity all through Europe, all the legislation that regulates those patents in the diverse countries in Europe to make sure they can go for that business and be successful.
That was not my answer. Even though I agree that remove internal barriers is potentially the vision, what we should aim at, I think that the route to get there is more going through joint forces, so the cluster approach. It's a more pragmatic, due to the fact that there is so many differences in tax, in labor laws, country by country, so that removing all barriers overnight, I think it's really only a vision, not something very pragmatic.
Thank you, Jacques. Last question. What should be the primary priority for the EU in terms of promoting trade? Sign the free trade agreement with the US that we heard about this morning. Number 2, aggressively implement the internal market policies and break internal market barriers. 3, sign a free trade agreement with China. Or 4, give more autonomy to countries to pursue their own trade policy. Very quickly, because I want to keep to our time schedule, just a few words, Philip. Surprising results?
And no.
Good?
No, in the context of what we're talking about here, but when we run our business, we also talk about empowering our local teams to be entrepreneurial and make local decisions and run their businesses in their local markets. So I get stuck with those two, right? We want our markets to be able to pursue their dreams as markets, but we don't want them to do it at the expense of Europe.
Yep. Although I clearly agree with the internal market integration, I actually voted for the first one, the free trade agreement for the US, because that might be the step to really force the implementation of the internal market.
Yeah, again here it confirms the importance of the internal market, because we don't have an internal market. We used to have one when we only produced goods. But now services is the business. We don't have so we have to re-establish an internal market. And by doing so, we automatically will end up with a new free trade agreement with the US.
I would support a free trade agreement with US because I think it would force Europe to move quicker.
I'm fully aligned with the answer. This is a target we should have, internal market. Yeah.
That's great. Dominique, I'm going to ask you to close this session with some final words and your take on this. Will we have growth?
I think we have done a lot of work to encourage and foster significant growth in Europe. So if we look at the good side of the coin, I would say frankly, and I know the day is not over and we still have to have some very interesting panels, but first, from a business standpoint, I think we are more and more aligned around this competitiveness imperative and the priorities that go with it. So the diagnosis for me is clear. Number two, frankly, I was overwhelmed by all the ideas of solutions and creations and ideas that were shared already this morning, both from this room here and also from the workshops in the other European capitals. Many good ideas to be put into action. Somebody said it also in our panel. Let's be honest, we are not the only ones to have good ideas, and official stakeholders, and be it in the EU and also in many European states, have already taken a lot of good, smart actions. So this is all the good side. We could say, so it's all well. But what we heard from the study and from Javier is that there is a growing impatience. Time and speed are of the essence. So I think here, what I would encourage us to do is be bolder in our leadership, because the truth of the matter is that we should not have the Commission discussing on one side, bankers on the other side, and us in this room. We should be all together having this same debate in order to accelerate change, because we are going in the right direction, but it's still too slow, and we are in an urgency. So let's break the barriers, let's be bold, and let's take action.
Thank you, Dominique. Thank you very much, panel. Thank you all for your voting. While we switch to the next panel, can I ask this panel for a quick photograph? And then can the new panel come up and sit down, and we'll go right to the next panel. So, just a quick photo up here, guys. Need you for 2 seconds. Okay. Quick photo, and the new panel comes up.
It's an industry.
This is, you want productivity, you got it.
Yes, we want it.
Okay. There you go. These our guys?
Do you mind if
This
I
is
make
our
a little
photographer.
jump?
Yeah.
Maybe
Do you mind if I make a
Yeah,
little
go ahead. Go ahead.
remove the chair, Jacques, because it will go.
We are precisely at 3:30 for our next roundtable discussion. Let me introduce my panel. First of all, I'm delighted that we have Laszlo Andor with us today, who's the European Commissioner for Employment and Social Affairs. And Laszlo, one of the topics that has come up all day today is the question of employment, so I'm sure we'll cover that in your remarks. I've got on my left the chair of the panel, Cindy Miller, who's president of UPS Europe, recently appointed. Welcome, Cindy. Thank you for chairing the panel. I've got Aymar Henao, CEO of Compass Group for France and Benelux, who is also providing us with our breaks and food today. Thank you, Aymar. I've got Alain Delez, who's president of ADECO France, and he's member of the group's executive committee. And I've got Patrick de Koning, who is SVP at 3M Europe, who also welcomed us in their offices in Milan. And I've got Per-Ola Carlsson, who will kick off right away with the first slide. Can we go to the first slide, please? Beyond the European social model. Per-Ola, it's yours.
Very good. Thank you, Bob. The European social model is not something that business leaders in general want to abandon, despite its costs. It has helped lift standards across Europe over the past 20 years and proving that the convergence principles that formed the backbone of European experiment once upon a time still work. But the corporate world considers that the social model now needs to be adapted to also foster more competitiveness and growth. They recognize that Europe needs to reform, and that reform will be difficult and painful, as it will impact many of the social contracts that have been built up over the years. As you can see on the screen, over 90% of respondents say the best way to balance budgets and improve productivity is by increasing the economic incentives to work. We can also note that the respondents are far more reluctant to reduce public health care benefits and to some extent also pensions. Please move forward. There's no consensus among business leaders on which social model will be the best going forward. This year, the percentage of business leaders who favor a more UK-inspired system with perhaps a bit more flexibility and efficient labor market has increased slightly. But frankly, a lot of it has to do with where people grew up and what they're used to and so forth. But as you can see on the slide here, when asked which of the social goals the EU should prioritize, corporate leaders are very keen to see more effective job policies for the young. Close to 90% are in agreement here. Some of the measures that are suggested to address this, while not on the slide here, is about putting in place tax incentives for companies hiring young. 72% favor that. Other measures could be putting in place investments and subsidies to help reskill some of the untrained to make sure that we better match those without jobs and where there are opportunities. Some 68% suggest that. But there's also many who would suggest that we do need to look at reform of labor regulation to increase flexibility and get rid of some of the rigidity that we've heard about earlier today. Another social goal that is close to the heart of leaders is about encouraging intra-European labor migration. We've heard so much about this today, and it really is one of the points that is put forth time and time again as a way of improving our competitiveness in the long run. It is also worth noting that a lot of the, back one slide please, a lot of the respondents are not looking at changing the European model, but rather making sure that we have a minimum of common standards on HEW, which means health, education, and welfare. So 59% actually encourage us to find a model in which all European nations think about a minimum standard to provide a level playing field across the European nations. Now you can flip. Now, reading this slide from the right to the left, we see that corporate leaders in many countries in certain parts of Europe, in Romania, in Spain, in Greece, and so forth, have great confidence in the institutions. In the north, though, in the UK and in many of the Nordic countries, there is greater confidence in national governments to initiate and drive change. In other words, the EU still has a legitimacy premium in the regions that need it the most. And here we may see the benefits of policy convergence from the EU as a way to bring about necessary structural changes and reforms in places where this would otherwise perhaps be more difficult to happen. One additional finding of the survey is that business believes the EU should intervene where it can help. And there are some areas that come back time and time again around economic and monetary and fiscal policy for sure. I mentioned around HEW issues just a few moments ago. But also a strong majority believe that the EU should receive more powers to influence national institutions to keep the European business playing field level. There's clearly a sense that we need to make sure that the rules of the game are similar in different places. So in sum, trust in the role of European institutions remains solid among corporate leaders. They want to safeguard the core aspects of the European social model, but recognize the need for targeted policy measures to solve the challenge of strengthening Europe's competitiveness, productivity, and growth as a way to lead us out of the crisis.
Thank you, Paolo, for sharing the results of the INSEAD and BOOST study. Cindy, I'm going to turn it over to you for setting the context for the debate.
Okay, thank you, Bob. And good afternoon. My name is Cindy Miller. I'm the EMEA president for UPS, and I have the pleasure of chairing our discussion entitled, as Bob mentioned earlier, Beyond the European Social Model, Refresh or Reform. So far today, we've had the pleasure of hearing very inspiring discussions about the future prospects of Europe as a global actor and reviving the European economy at this critical time. These discussions are incomplete without reflection upon European citizens and the opportunities we want to secure for Europe's workforce. With me today, I have a panel of distinguished speakers who will do just that. And during this session, we will also have the honor of a keynote address from Laszlo Andor, EU Commissioner for the Employment, Social Affairs, and Inclusion. But before we begin our debate this afternoon, I would like to talk briefly to you about my own employer, UPS. UPS is a global leader in logistics, as we love logistics, for those of you who may have seen a commercial or two. We seek to promote growth, jobs, and competitiveness in Europe, the US, and beyond. In our package cars, those brown vehicles you may see around Europe, trailers and planes, we carry approximately 6% of the US GDP and 2% of the global GDP every day across 220 territories and countries. Such global reach requires many hands, 400,000 UPSers globally, and here in Europe, we proudly employ over 43,000. Even at a time when many companies are not necessarily investing, we are currently significantly expanding our European air hub facilities in Cologne, and that expansion project is due to be completed by the end of this year, and we'll see an increase in activity in and around Cologne, which hosts our largest operation outside of the US. And with that investment also comes more employment. So we identify ourselves as a major European employer with vested interests in the prosperity of the European economy and the overall employment market. Now, as many of you at the conference saw Jim Barber, my boss, the UPS International President, speak this morning, he mentioned that it all comes down to people. People for UPS are our secret sauce. Loyal and capable people have always been our most valuable resource. We build our organization around people and believe they do their best when their talents are encouraged to flourish in a dynamic business environment. We do this by cultivating a strong company culture, our own social model, if you will, which offers our people opportunities for professional development by encouraging mobility and promotion from within, prioritizes their health, wellness, and safety, and provides equal opportunities for all. Speaking of development and mobility, I began my career as a UPS package car delivery driver in Allentown, Pennsylvania, in the US, back in 1988. My time at UPS has given me opportunities across the US, in Europe, and a huge variety of other business departments, and that has been since my days as a driver in 1988, and that includes 9 moves in my 25 years. Nurturing professional development by providing such diverse opportunities is what UPS is all about. We support the development of our people, and we are committed to providing a challenging and rewarding work environment in which our people can grow. And secondly, we promote the health, wellness, and safety of our employees. We place a huge importance on training our people to avoid injuring themselves and others but all UPSers in all aspects of their work. UPS is known for its iconic drivers, and in February of this year, we welcomed 1,283 drivers to our prestigious Circle of Honor, which recognizes drivers who have achieved at least 25 years of driving without a single accident. I have difficulty 25 days moving back to Brussels. The UPS Circle of Honor continues to reach record heights, totaling almost 6,500 of these drivers, and is a great example of how we place safety at the heart of our service. And last but not least, we promote diversity. Diversity of nationalities, diversity of cultures, gender, and age. UPS is an equal opportunities employer and places great value on diversity, not only within our workforce, but also for our customers and the communities in which we serve. Given the part-time and overnight nature of some of the work we do, we have a large and diverse workforce in Europe that includes a large number of immigrants. As an example, over 13% of our workforce in that large hub in Cologne carries a Turkish passport. This brings with it both challenges and opportunities, but is something that we think we will see an increase in and not a decrease as Europe continues to experience demographic change. UPS has also been a front runner in tackling the gender gap. Our Women's Leadership Development Program brings talented women from the hiring phase through skills development and into higher levels of responsibility at UPS. And I would say that I sit before you as a testimony of that such belief in our programs. And as Dominique mentioned in her talking points earlier, we like to invest and we believe in investing in young people. In Louisville, Kentucky alone, where we have our Worldport hub for international distribution, we support 3,500 students who work for us during the evening and attend school during the day. We work closely with the state of Kentucky and the city of Louisville and the local colleges and universities to provide financial support for students who choose to balance their academic studies with part-time employment. This initiative has been a huge success, providing the proverbial win-win outcome for both the students and UPS, where we get a dedicated and stable workforce, while 3,500 students get their tuition paid and their foot into the door for a continuation of a possible career within UPS. In Europe, we also run numerous educational programs. We contribute to employee tuition fees, and we are working to provide internship and traineeship opportunities for our younger generation. At a time when youth unemployment in Europe is alarmingly high, and more senior workers are concerned that they may lose their jobs and never find employment again in today's fast-moving and competitive world, I commend the European Commission and the countries for their innovative work in this area. And we look forward to working with the EU policymakers to take the ambitions and achievements of the European employment and social policy and adapt them to meet the pressing needs of today's workforce. Combining the diverse, skilled, and mobile workforce we have in the European Union with our UPS culture is what has made our operation here the success that it is today. And to preserve the strength of Europe and its ability to provide opportunities for both current and future generations of workers, the emphasis must be placed on creating more jobs, encouraging entrepreneurs and the small business owners, and restarting growth in Europe, which obviously has been mentioned many times throughout the day and will continue, I'm sure, as the conference continues. So finally, before I hand the floor over to our presenters and panelists, it's extremely important that our European policymakers and stakeholders alike maintain a broad vision. The Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, which Jim Barber mentioned earlier as TTIP, a trade agreement between the EU and the US, which we expect to be launched in the next few weeks, is laden with opportunities for boosting employment in Europe and the US and creating a transatlantic standard for labor policy in third countries. For UPS, we have estimated that a comprehensive TTIP could boost our trading volume by 131 million packages, which would create an additional 24,000 jobs over the next 10 years. Now, that's an incredibly exciting prospect, which is why we are looking forward to the coming months as negotiations begin. So with that, I would like to hand the floor over back to Bob, who has done such a great job today, and we'll get into the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Laszlo, one of the things that has come up all day today is the question of labor flexibility. How do we solve the youth unemployment? How do we get more agreements with other regions so that we can create more jobs, as Cindy has talked about? Could you address some of these issues and give us your perspective?
Well, first of all, let me thank you for the opportunity to discuss all these important issues here, and I congratulate to the survey. I think it's hitting absolutely important questions. I think the specificity of the current situation is that we are facing a combination of short-term and long-term challenges when we see the social crisis. In many countries, as our president also pointed to this on numerous occasions, there is actually a social emergency. But when we want to find the solutions, whether it's about the labor market regulation, whether it's a pension system, we have to see both the short-term emergency, but also the long-term challenges. In fact, when this commission started, we first looked into the long-term challenges and introduced the Euro 2020 strategy, behind which you find a lot of important demographic consideration. Why am I saying this? Because some of the findings of the survey also can only be understood if we appreciate the fact that in the European Union we have an aging population, we have an aging workforce, in fact an aging and shrinking workforce, because historically in the last few decades fertility also has been very low. And this pure fact of demography already leads to conclusions what concerns pension systems, what concerns the organization of the labor market, and the efforts we have to make to improve the performance of training, and also what we call the school-to-work transitions. Probably you have seen that in the last period, these two questions, how to deal with aging and how to deal with the youth, how to help the youth, have been in the focus of many Commission actions. On aging, we organized the whole year, the European Year for Active Aging, and solidarity between the generations, by the way, to identify the policies which will help many workers to stay on the labor market longer, because I agree with the findings. I saw there is a strong support in making careers longer and postponing retirement, not only the statutory but also the effective retirement age. Indeed, we have been promoting pension reforms, and we continue to do so. It's not only about the retirement age, but also many other aspects of the pension system which will help in this. But if you look at the preconditions, we also need to invest in the workforce in order to make this happen. We need to invest in lifelong learning to ensure that skills remain competitive, and we also need to invest in health and safety at the workplace. And I'm also always happy when I hear that the business is supportive of this, because sometimes politicians may believe that there is a view that would you only see this as a cost. No, this is also an investment, and as our workforce is aging and shrinking, the added value of this investment is indeed increasing. We would like to factor in this information into a consultation which we just launched on occupational safety and health, and it's an online consultation. You are very welcome to contribute to this. But let me briefly also speak about the youth. Indeed, there's more and more visibility and political support on very high levels. The European Council again later this month will discuss youth employment, and I think we have to avoid that this becomes a kind of campaign issue for politicians, when in America, for example, before elections, politicians are kissing babies In Europe, before elections, politicians speak about youth unemployment. Our heart is breaking, but perhaps sometimes it would be very important to ensure that the budgetary decisions are also consistent with these emotions, which fly high in a pre-election period. What the Commission has been proposing in a youth employment package last December is a youth guarantee, which is based on the best practice of a few countries, Austria and Finland, which would help changing the mode of operation of the public employment services in many EU countries, particularly in the south, to use the best practices which exist, Austria, Germany. We fostered their cooperation to transfer this know-how and boost apprenticeships, traineeships, and improve the quality of the vocational training through reforms in order to provide the foundations for this youth guarantee. That would ensure that this dramatic level of youth unemployment can come down in the southern countries, Spain, from which we had the visit of the government yesterday here in Brussels, but also many others. This requires money, and that's why it's important that in the EU budget we have a European Social Fund. We have now a new 6 billion instrument for youth employment, but it also requires commitment from companies. Our President, Mr. Barroso, many times appealed to businesses, small, medium and big businesses, in order to create apprenticeship, to participate in this effort to revive the great traditions of apprenticeship where this existed before, but perhaps with deindustrialization, with an adjustment to globalization, some of these practices actually died out or diminished. So all this needs to be revived. Now, I looked with a lot of interest to one of the charts which you presented here, which is about how much needs to be Europeanized out of these measures and standards. I think this is absolutely fascinating because in the recent years, step by step, we had to kind of develop a deep and complex understanding that we are indeed in a European crisis. It's not just a general financial crisis, but it's a crisis of the monetary union. And in order to overcome all this, we need to strengthen a lot of different types of cooperation on the EU level, including some of these policies. So we have prepared a lot in this area. Of course, when it's about the welfare states, our primary responsibility is to help the member states themselves in order to make their spending more efficient. But it's also true that more and more comes to the European level, and we need to have full agreement with all the stakeholders and the member states what exactly should be done on the European level in the future. That's why we very much value the social dialogue, the dialogue with employers, businesses, and also the social partners on the other side, the trade unions, and we want to engage everyone in this dialogue to prepare the way forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the remarks. Let me now run a video from Bernadette Segal, who couldn't be with us today, but is in Dublin for a trade union conference, and then we'll kick off the debate amongst our panelists. Video, please.
Dear friends, I'm sorry I can't be with you today. I'm in Dublin for our midterm conference, High Noon for Social Europe. This conference, of course, is a major event for the European Trade Union Confederation. And indeed, it's high noon for social Europe, and it's high noon for the European Union. Leaders will destroy the European project if they transform it into a mere area for social and market competition. In the last year, we have witnessed a number of important developments. A single currency, economic governance are very significant steps indeed. But we haven't seen any movement towards social Europe. No initiative on restructuring to help workers who are losing their jobs. We've seen no program on health and safety. We've seen no progress to secure equal treatment for posted workers. We see, on the contrary, initiatives to liberalize, to deregulate, to get workers to compete downwards on wages and working conditions. Economic policy put in place have severely hit employment and industrial relation systems. And it is not surprising in this condition that social unrest, rejection of the European project, and rise of populism are spreading across Europe. This is extremely dangerous. ETUC will not join in populist or nationalistic groups, but we will pull the alarm bell. Social Europe must be at the core of all economic decisions. Social Europe is not a plaster to stick on economic governance. Social Europe is part and parcel of economic governance. Economic and political decisions which were and are taken to overcome the crisis have failed. Austerity has failed, and its negative impacts still continue to worsen the life of millions of European citizens and workers. Therefore, it is essential to change macroeconomic policies if we want to be able to seriously speak about social Europe. The EU must respond to this social emergency and give a priority to a social dimension to restore citizens and workers' trust in the European project and in its future potential. A roadmap on the social dimension of the EMU must aim at upward convergence. It must deal with inequalities, poverty, unemployment, and precarious work. There can be no sustainable economic governance of coordination of policies if these injustices are not addressed. We don't want to discuss only the social dimension of the Economic and Monetary Union. The whole of the EU must be involved, and social situation everywhere must be improved. The EU social dimension must be grounded in the respect of fundamental social rights and the improvement of living and working conditions. It must respect the autonomy of the social partners and promote our successful European social model made of strong social protection, quality public services, and social dialogue. The EU social dimension must be real and effective. The European Trade Union Confederation has always been supportive of the European project, primarily because this regional integration model aimed not only at integration, but was meant to foster social progress and full employment. We remain convinced that potentially the European Union is a project worth investing in. It is by far better than a renationalization of economies, which would not lead to more and better jobs. We need a change of course if social Europe is to become a reality. Without this change, ETUC support will be in doubt. This is my message to you from Dublin. Have a good conference.
Patrick. Yes. Austerity has failed. We've made no movement pretty much on any of the fronts that Cindy mentioned, which were things like diversity, safety, health and welfare for employees. Is this an extreme view? Is this what do you think?
Thank you. Well, good. Sorry. Good afternoon, everybody. Why did we end up here is basically what we need to ask ourselves the question, because the reason for austerity was basically that because years we have been spending what we didn't have. So at the end of the day, sooner or later it catches up to you. Now austerity alone is not working either, and that is basically the challenge I think that we are all facing together. How can we manage both? On one hand, do some austerity in order to bring our financial house in order? And on the other hand, how can we stimulate growth? And that is really the challenge that every company is facing, because we also need to manage our finances and at the same time invest what we can invest in order to drive growth. And I think that is what we see also in the outside world. And that is really what, in my opinion, the fundamental issue is, that we need to find a way to solve altogether. And our social model is something that we, as Europeans, are all proud of, because it has done a lot of good to the people over the past 100 years. But to a certain extent, it's becoming counterproductive, because it's stimulating unemployment versus stimulating growth. And I think that is what we need to see. And probably we need to change the mix of that social investment towards using it more to stimulate growth rather than driving unemployment. And that starts with education. And it has been said a number of times, and I think all the parties should be engaged in that. It's the private sector, it's the different governmental constituencies, being it the European Union, being it the countries, and also the educational system in general. I think the three parties need to find a way to work together. So that's my first introduction to the debate.
Thank you, Patrick. Parola, if I put Bernadette right next to you, would the two of you have a friendly debate, or would you agree on more things than not?
Well, I think certainly we would have a debate. I mean, the challenge we have right now, I think, is that we've been so caught in a discussion between austerity or growth stimulation, right? And it's a discussion which isn't particularly helpful, right? It's a combination of both we need to have in the end. And I think what we clearly learned from the survey and from all the business leaders we've been listening to here is that the question should be much more around how do we drive competitiveness, and that will have elements around changing some of the social models we have. It will have elements around reforming a number of the structural models that exist in Europe that certainly have austerity aspects to them, right? There's no question on that. But there is a need to do it in a way where it doesn't just result in, as you were suggesting, Patrick, a second ago here, where we see joblessness coming out of it. And so perhaps by approaching the problem much more from a question on how do we drive competitiveness, how do we increase productivity, and how do we do that through a combination of measures which are some austerity-centric, if you will, and others are much more around growth, stimulating innovation, and so forth, we may find a better solution and path forward than where we are right now.
Cindy, what would you respond to Bernadette?
Well, I think to Patrick's point, how did we get here? And I think the discussion has been it didn't happen overnight. And I believe that to consider austerity not the answer is a little premature as well, in the fact that it won't get fixed overnight. That which took so long to become counterproductive. I thought that was a very good term that Patrick had used. I think patience and temperance obviously need to come into play somewhere in there. I'm recently moved from the UK, and just this past weekend moved back to Brussels after having lived here a few years ago. And the debate, the very strong debate in the UK is it's very difficult to incentivize a youth group or a workforce at large when staying home and receiving some of the social net benefits becomes a better employment option or a better income opportunity than joining companies such as ours or some other companies at entry-level positions and working your way up to greater levels of responsibility. And I think that that those types of specific things certainly do need to be addressed, and I believe it was one of the questions that we voted on just earlier, as far as what do we see as being one of the problems that needs immediate fixing. And I think making working incentivized as opposed to not working and being better off, that's obviously got to be addressed.
Basil, I'm sure you've had this discussion with Bernadette at one point. What's your reaction to her video?
On the question of the austerity, I don't think it comes from some kind of obsession with the austerity. I think it's probably true, and now there's a lot of evidence that if we, with hindsight, look back to the last 3 or 6 years, you can go through which decisions and find out whether the best option was taken or not. It's very much of sometimes the calibration of the measures rather than the direction as a whole. But where I'm definite, and I think Bernadette has a point, although she didn't say it, that the fact that we have a systemic crisis of the monetary union and this needs to be repaired was recognized too late. And certainly there are many consequences of that. But since last year, the Commission also produced a blueprint, and many of these measures could be brought forward. A banking union, absolutely fundamental, but there is slow motion, I would say, when we would need a lot faster motion. On the various reforms, I think there is an interesting situation here, because many of the questions should be looked at in a country-by-country analysis, because there is a certain diversity of the social welfare systems. We do speak sometimes about the European social model because there are similarities, shared traditions, shared history, but there's a lot of difference between Finland and Portugal, Ireland and Hungary or Austria. So a lot needs to be looked at in a national context. Yes, a lot of welfare systems could be made more smarter, introducing more incentives. Also, for example, in Germany, to have second earners, being more incentivized to participate in the labor market. But I would not draw a conclusion that overall the welfare states are, so to speak, counterproductive, because if you look at the northern countries, you see very productive welfare states. So there is a way to combine a decent level of social protection and high level of economic productivity and competitiveness as well. So this is what we are encouraging member states to do, where we can give advice without direct EU competence, that please learn from those who can combine economic competitiveness with social cohesion, even if it sometimes fails even in Sweden, which we saw recently, that because of the lack of opportunities, some people go to the streets sometimes.
And you are in the heart of the people business at Adecco. No progress along any of the dimensions, as Bernadette says. We're not making any progress and headway on diversity issues, health and safety. Do you share that perspective?
Well, I would like to react and comment not only on what Bernadette Segol has said, but also of some comment of the Euro Commissioner Andor. At Adecco, work and employment is really somehow our core business. We consider work and employment as a basic need, as a basic human right. And our company is present in 64 countries. We have every day 750,000 people working, out of which 50%, so more than 350,000 people working in Europe. And what do we see as a challenge in Europe? We see 3 challenges. The first one has been also commented by Euro Commissioner Andor, that's demography. And it hasn't been discussed a lot today, but is on the midterm and long term, it's a huge challenge we will have to face to get our talent, to retain our talent. So I will not further comment this. The second, when we speak about unemployment and work, we need growth. And because we know from our experience, and we are in this activity since more than 50 years, if we don't have GDP growth, you don't have work creation. So, and as I say always, Adecco is not a provider of activity, is a provider of job, but we don't create activity. And the third challenge is unemployment, and as you said, especially the youth unemployment. And it's incredible. Today in Europe, we have 12% unemployment, but even more worse, that's the youth unemployment. And like the financial people have with the golden rule, we have with the youth unemployment the black rule. And the black rule is that in every single European country, you have double more unemployment with the young people than with the average country unemployment. Take Spain, more than 50% unemployment. 1 out of 2 Spanish young people doesn't have job. France, 25%, so 1 out of 5. Now, we have seen the last time that a lot of measures have been taken on the fiscality, financial measures and so on, but we do think there is an urgent need for reform. So coming back to your title, we don't need to refresh, we need urgently to reform. And we see 5 key priorities. The first one is to lower the labor cost, because we see in a lot of countries a huge labor cost in Europe, because a lot of governments are financing a lot of initiatives through extra burden on the labor cost, not really related to the labor. The second, and it has been also mentioned by Commissioner Andor, that's training and education. And especially in Europe, we need to invest in reskilling, but we have also to invest in standardization of our education system and diploma recognition. I will give you some figures. Today, we have 3 million non-provided jobs in Europe. If I just take France, it's more than 300,000 people, open job, we can't fill. So there is an urgent need to align the needs of the companies, the people, and the education system. Because, that's also the third point, after lower labor costs training, there is also a need to increase the attractiveness for mobility. Today, it's quite difficult to be mobile as a worker in Europe, and it is a good introduction to my fourth point. We need also a kind of European-wide pension system. It's today, and I'm one of example, it is very difficult to work in 5 years in a country and 5 years in other countries, and I'm really scared about from whom I will get my pension when I will turn 65 or 70, because it's a long time from now, yeah. And last but not least, and it refers to our industry, we need, and the companies need much more flexibility. And the European Community has taken an initiative with the Agency Work Directive, but we see that in a lot of countries, there are still a lot of barriers for the flexibility. And I'm saying that not for the sake of flexibility. I'm saying that because it is proven that when you have a fluid and flexible labor market, then the economy and the country is rebounding much faster than when you don't have. So those 5 key priorities, and where I join Bernadette Segol, we need all of that with an excellent social dialogue. It is really the key to go forward, not only the social dialogue, but also courage and optimism. And so we'll go further. Thank you.
Imar, you're also a large employer across Europe. What's your reaction?
I would most likely disagree on the basic assumption, which is that we have austerity currently. I mean, when you look at most of our Southern Europe economies, governments still pay pensions, healthcare costs are being covered, unemployed people, most of them at least, are still taken care of. I don't think that's austerity. And yet, we all know it's not sustainable. We finance it with debt. So I think the premise is wrong that we are currently in austerity, but I would agree that austerity is inevitable tomorrow if we don't fundamentally change the rule of the game in the employment market. Two things, I mean, which, you know, two things I would like to look at. One is something that was done in Germany in the early 2000s, in 2003.